Greetings, digital world. Welcome back to another episode of Spliced In Later. Let me tell you, a lot has happened since the last time I spoke to you guys, which was for a wonderful review of The Suicide Squad, I believe it was. I believe I cursed myself in that episode when I said, how great is it that I live in a place that hasn't been locked down? Well, since then, COVID has reared its ugly head here in the ACT, Canberra, capital of Australia. We've gone into a snap lockdown that's turned into 3 weeks, and due to the community transmission, whatever, I've also had to spend many an hour lined up to get a COVID test. At this point, I do not know what the result will be, but thanks to vaccinations, I'm pretty confident it'll be good. But this all kicked off around some other personal tragedies going on in my life last week, which prevented me from being able to do an episode. And I really didn't feel like doing this one, but I thought, since I'm stuck at home anyway for the foreseeable future, I literally cannot go anywhere due to my close contactness with other cases, I may as well try and get this one out. And I'm excited to do this one. It's another step in our look at the Disney ages, and it is the Disney age known as the Renaissance, the Disney Renaissance. Basically, the best of the best, the high point of Walt Disney Pictures and Walt Disney's animated classics. And I think it's that for a number of reasons that we're going into. I believe you may or may not have seen my top 10 animated Disneys, but most of the films that were on that top 10 or in the honorable mentions are a part of this age. Most of the people who you talk to, their top 10s will probably include most of these films. The films that people are most familiar with, the films that have made the most impact, the films that they are now turning into live action films, they mostly come from this period. It was an interesting time. The age technically goes from 1989 through to 1999, which is a good 10 years. And of that, it produced solid films, most of them spectacular, some controversial, as with most Disney things sometimes do not age particularly well, but we're not going to focus too much on that. But not only successful at the box office, bringing in the money, but also critically acclaimed. These films impressed critics and audience goers worldwide. They'd launched their own franchises. This was coming in at a time where Disney started to make TV shows based on their popular movies, toys, video games. Video games had taken off with PlayStation and all of that. So this Disney content was just in people's faces completely all the time, which I think also helped to really hammer home its nostalgia for people. But it also is quality content. As I discussed with you back when how long ago was it now? I can't remember. But when we looked at the Bronze Age of Disney, which wasn't necessarily the Dark Ages or anything like that some people like to call it. It was another time of solid Disney content. Disney produced several films that were not terrible, also not amazing every single time. There are everyone's favorite few. I know I mentioned a couple in the Bronze Age that I really, really do like. But there is an essence from that period that there was some efforts with money making devolving into cutting costs to save money in terms of the animation that went into making the Xerox, the scratchy animation, saving money here and there. Not too extravagant with the ideas that they went with. A lot of the same sort of stuff of talking animals, having to do this or that with London as the backdrop setting. Every now and then they took a risk like the Black Cauldron and it would not be successful. But for the most part, the opinion of movies during the Bronze Age from Disney was, I can rely on them to produce an entertaining enough animated film. It may not appeal to everybody, it may not be the greatest film of all time, but it will be entertaining for sure, and I will go see it. And then I will probably never talk about it again, because this is back in the time, videos and stuff weren't a thing yet, so people didn't rewatch stuff over and over again, which is another thing that really contributed to the Renaissance was the rise of videotapes and then eventually DVDs. People had the ability to purchase the films that they liked and then rewatch them over and over again. And this specific period for the Disney Renaissance was when these were really exploding. You could get all different videos. You get the Disney collection. And specifically, people would get the ones they remembered from seeing in the cinemas because they're the ones that stuck with them. Also, another thing about the Renaissance is just, it was lightning in a bottle for multiple films. Like things were leaps and bounds in terms of quality and storytelling and animation than what had come before it. You do see a similar sort of pattern with most of these films. They do follow one particular protagonist, a heroic figure. Normally the movie is named after them. They are misfit, they are downtrodden, they are neglected or poo-pooed, all sorts of different things. Maybe they have a destiny they need to achieve, but they're at that point, they don't feel like they could achieve the destiny or whatever. But for a series of very dark but also kid-friendly events, these protagonists, these heroes will rise to the challenge. And it's the likability of these heroes that make up the Disney Renaissance that people stuck with completely. Add on top of that, as I mentioned in my other chats, what makes really good about Disney sometimes is when they really make memorable villains. Captain Hook, I remember being one of my first examples. There are a ton of villains in these Disney Renaissance films as well that are larger than life and memorable and extravagant to a point where sometimes they can steal the show from the heroes that we're trying to support. So even though you love to hate them, you appreciate the villains and you remember them. They stick with you in a way that no villains really had done before. There's also a variety here. You didn't go to a Disney film and go, all right, it's talking animals about to do a thing. Each movie here, there's something different about each one. There's only one film that is a sequel to a film that came out in the Bronze Age. The rest, every single one, aside from the same formula of a heroic protagonist that has to do a thing and stop an over-the-top villain, the settings and backdrops and scenarios are wildly different, whether it's in the French villages, Africa, Mount Olympus, the jungle, all these different places. There's just such a variety to them where you watch it and you go, I don't believe I've seen this before. This isn't the same formula, the same thing, the same safety net that Disney had been going on for some time just to know that they would get the assurances that they would from producing the same content over and over again. What else is there that's great about the Disney Renaissance? You also get a wide variety of wacky characters besides our hero and villain. Lots of sidekicks and henchmen and minions, which are all memorable. The animation itself was kicked up a notch. We didn't rely on the Xerox scratchy tone anymore of just printing out the animation like we were doing before. The animation sparkled in a magical way that people think of when they think of Disney. If you go to Disneyland and you just feel that magic of the castle with the Tinkerbell that flies over it, and you just feel a sense of wonder, these films perfectly captured that sense of wonder and awe from that era. Contributing to that, star power. We started hiring well-known actors to come in and voice these characters, which would also appeal to people to come and see these films. You would go, James L. Jones is the voice of Mufasa. Come and see us for that. Minnie Driver, Brian Blessed, James Woods, Rip Torn, Harvey Fierstein, Jodie Benson. So let's be fair, they're not gigantic stars, some of them are, but for the 90s, these were the stars of the 90s with absolute certainty. And each single one of these films has somebody that is the star appeal. I'm trying very hard not to once again jump and say Robin Williams for Aladdin, but it is a perfect example. The wonder of Robin Williams is what a lot of people appealed to go see Aladdin, and then they stayed for the actual quality and concept of the Aladdin story. I think it is truly fair to say that the Disney Renaissance is one of the most universally acclaimed periods of Disney's history. To this day, it is beloved by all sorts of Disney fans, and even just not Disney fans, just people who enjoy good film, good animated films. Even the most cynical Disney fan will still be able to look at this period and go, yeah, there was some good stuff in here. A lot of these films are considered to be gold standards. They are what all the Disney films after this were measured against. And when we eventually get to talk about the next era, which I believe is called the post-Renaissance age, which is a really boring title, you could call that one the Dark Ages or whatever. We'll get to that at some point. But as much as I really like a lot of the films that were in there, the quality and content of the Renaissance films elevated to such an extent that a lot of films after this have just been measured up to something which they don't necessarily have to achieve. There is a high bar that other films after the Disney Renaissance have easily crossed. But to get to that overhanging chandelier that is these films is no easy task, and not every film can do it. But unfortunately, for people who love these films so much, they might go, if it's not a Disney Renaissance level film, it isn't a good film, which is a shame. But we will get to that when we talk about the other era later on. As I've done before, I will go through and briefly mention each of the films in this era. I will say whether I like them or not, and some little tidbits or whatever. And the important thing is for you to go, oh, I remember that film. Oh, I like that film. Oh, I hate that film. Oh, why? The Disney Renaissance includes that film, which you will have for a couple of these films. It officially starts off in 1989 with The Little Mermaid. A wonderful, lovely little story, if you ignore the bit about women believing that men will improve their life, whatever. Anyway, Ariel is there's a little mermaid, obviously. She lives underwater, but she's fascinated by the world above her. She spies a man on land called Prince Eric, immediately falls in love with him, which is a big no-no for King Triton, who believes that the people up on land are terrible and dangerous, and we've got to stay away from them. Then, of course, we get to our villain, our very over-the-top but wonderfully evil Ursula, a sea witch, who gives her legs but takes away her voice, and she's got 3 days to convince Eric to fall in love with her with true love's kiss and all of that. And of course, full of wonderful magical songs, a wide wacky side characters. I'd love Sebastian the crab. I would imitate him, but that may be inappropriate. But also Flounder and Scuttle. Even I have a really favorite song in this film called Les Poissons, which no one else likes, but it's just basically the chef talking about how he murders fish, and I love it. It is so much fun, and I think I may be the only one who appreciates that. Quality animation as well, with the water and the sun and all of that. It just looks great. For a 1989 animated film, it looks up to snuff with a lot of the most recent 2000 stuff. After the low points of the last two films that came before The Little Mermaid, which I liked both the films, The Great Mouse Detective and Oliver and Company, but they didn't really bring in the money or the critical acclaim that Disney wanted for those films. But Little Mermaid became one of the most successful films the studio had produced in years. It broke 2 box office records, probably more, I think. I haven't researched this properly. But it also received 2 Academy Awards, which was rare for an animated film to do. But Little Mermaid set a pace at which the rest of the Disney Renaissance films would follow. And indeed, many animated films have done since then, not just Disney, but Pixar and several other companies. After Little Mermaid, you may not know this, but The Rescuers Down Under is also part of the Renaissance in 1990. It is a fine enough film. It is one of the few Disney films that is a sequel to The Rescuers, which came out in 1977. I think where it fell was that The Rescuers Down Under is still advertised for children, and children were not children in 1977. They weren't born. They weren't alive yet. And I don't think The Rescuers was enough of a cherished product that when the new film came out, all the older people went, well, we got to go back and see The Rescuers again. What are Basil and Miss Bianca up to? And the kids went, okay, cool, that's fine, whatever. I remember when I watched it as a kid, I didn't know there was an original Rescuers. I thought it was just The Rescuers Down Under. And I liked it because it was in Australia, and that's where I am. It is a fun, simple enough movie. I love Bernard as a protagonist because he's just so hapless. And George C. Scott, who may be one of the most intense actors I've ever seen, is once again the over-the-top villain here, Percival C. McLeish, who is horrifying in his ultimate goal of basically just killing animals. It's fairly forgettable though. I often forget it is included in here. I often think it's before this age, but it isn't. But it's got its fans, and it in terms of Disney's lowest points, this is certainly not one of them. Beauty and the Beast. Then we got Beauty and the Beast. That came after The Rescuers Down Under in 1991. Many consider it to be the greatest Disney film of all time. It certainly has that opinion enough that it was one of the very first to get a live-action remake. I love it. It's definitely on my top 10 for sure. If you want to know what the exact order of my top 10s were, go back to my episode and watch that. Everyone knows the story of Beauty and the Beast. Belle is a bookworm that is misunderstood by her town, who has to become a prisoner of the evil beast who lives in a castle in the woods in order to free her father. And the beast was once a handsome but cruel and vain nasty man who got cursed by a witch along with the rest of his household to live as a beast and other household objects until, again, a common occurrence here, I suppose, is true love will fix him. And of course, Belle and the beast eventually form an attachment and a love for each other. She sees that there's more to him than just the gruff exterior. She unhardens his heart. And they, of course, have to deal with, once again, another magnificent villain in Gaston, the vain and over-the-top and just awfully bad but fun to watch handsome man of the town who all the girls want to be with and all the guys want to be. And he has his eyes set on Belle because she's beautiful, that's all. And of course, when he realizes his competition is a beast, things get out of hand. It is a great film. Yes, there might be some Stockholm Syndrome issues in here, But as with most of these films, there's always an issue. Once again, the animation looks spectacular. We've got some great side characters in Lumiere and Cogsworth and LeFou. But overall, it is a very intense story with some powerful songs as well. Some of the most quotable songs, whether it's nice and sweet like Beauty and the Beast or horrifying in the Mob song. But this was the one. Not only did Beauty and the Beast also win 2 Academy Awards, it was nominated for others, and including Best Picture, which very few animated films have been included in that nomination. You can argue that Academy Awards is a trollop and not really a good reflection on movies, and I tend to agree with that sometimes. But it is a incredible achievement that is worth celebrating for sure. Immediately after Beauty and the Beast in 1992 was Aladdin, and I've discussed Aladdin many times, either in my top 10 Disney or my recent tribute to Robin Williams. It is also a great film using the backdrop of Agrabah and a young street rat named Aladdin who wants to make something of his life. Meanwhile, there's Jafar, another over-the-top fantastic villain, the vizier to the Sultan who wants to become Sultan, if that means marrying Princess Jasmine or whatever he has to do, but mainly he wants to get a magic lamp because he knows that will help him do it. He uses Aladdin to get it because only the diamond in the rough can get it, which of course unleashes Robin Williams' genie onto the world and his wacky zaniness and his improvisational skills. And Aladdin gets the genie to help him try and win Jasmine's heart. But with most things that you can guess, with the true way to win Jasmine's heart is not to pretend to be someone else, but to be your own man. Aladdin is one of the most likable protagonists out of all this bunch. I think he's great. The action is top notch in here. The sense of dread and fear that Jafar emanates is quite something. And again, Genie as the Robin Williams in animated form essentially steals the show with his improvisation and his jokes and all of that going on, which is just incredible. A side note is that Aladdin is also one of the few Disney films from the Disney Renaissance to have a series of direct-to-video films which are good. I've said before in The Fox and the Hound 2 that I don't hold any of these films that go direct to DVD against them for being subpar. They're made to make money, and that's it. And you shouldn't hold them up to a certain standard that they're not going to get. But for Aladdin, and for Little Mermaid, and for the next film coming up, the sequels that they released are genuinely very good. Great character development, advances the stories for all concerned, has some memorable songs of their own, and are worth viewing for sure if you haven't. So if you haven't seen The Return of Jafar or Aladdin and the King of Thieves, check that out. If you haven't seen The Little Mermaid 2, Return to the Sea, I recently rewatched it. It doesn't hold up as well as I remember it doing, but it was also a solid film. But the sequels to the next film are magnificent, as is the film itself, The Lion King. Many consider The Lion King to be one of Disney's greatest. It has also been remade into a live-action film, just like Aladdin and Beauty and the Beast and all that. It is basically the story of Hamlet, but with lions. Simba is destined to follow in his father Mufasa's footsteps. Scar is the evil uncle that wants to be king, orchestrates events so that Simba is to be exiled from the kingdom and he himself becomes king. Simba eventually will have to return once he grows up under the tutelage of wacky Timon and Pumbaa to take on Scar to see who will be king of the Pride Lands. Now this has the best, most memorable songs of the bunch so far, and the animation as well, using paints and the combination of African settings and stories and music and all that. It just looks incredible. As I said, wacky characters as well. Timon and Pumbaa is probably the greatest Disney comedic duo of all time. Scar is wonderful, with Jeremy Irons as this very sinister guy who is out to become the king by any means necessary. It's truly incredible. I think everybody can agree with me on that one. There's not much more to say on that. And for a while, before Frozen 2, and I suppose there's probably a few other films that I can't quite recall, The Lion King was the highest grossing animated film of all time. After this bunch were a couple more films. Pocahontas. I don't mind Pocahontas. I've always liked Pocahontas' animation and music, but I can agree with people that the story is a bit off in terms of what they're telling, because they are telling their own adaptation of the real-life story of Pocahontas and her relationship with John Smith, which is not at all what is portrayed in the movie. However, I really like some of the songs in here. I think the animation looked great, and I don't think it deserves to be called terrible, but it has some issues, which will prevent me from talking about it much further on here. After that, the Hunchback of Notre Dame. Again, I don't mind the Hunchback of Notre Dame. There is, in terms of the story, it's a very run-of-the-mill story of believing in yourself and all of that and not letting looks judge your opinion of people, whatever. But I do really like Judge Frollo in here, the imagery with the devil and hell and all of that. It's very disturbing, especially for a kids animated film as well. After that, Hercules. I've said many a times Hercules is great. Apparently, I talked to people about this and not everyone agrees with me that they like Hercules. Again, the animation, what they use to with the clouds and Zeus and Mount Olympus and all that, the difference between the gods and what they're doing up in the clouds and what is set in Greece and Thebes and all of that down below. It's an incredible contrast between God and human, and it's the line that Hercules walks in here because, of course, he's supposed to be a god, but he's made immortal. Not immortal, he's made immortal. Then he has to team up with the wonderful Danny DeVito as Phil, who trains him to be a true hero. He has to learn what it means to be a true hero. We all know that he originally is going to think that it's all about being strong, but there's more to it than that. And James Woods is Hades. He's just, come on, come on. His mannerisms is just absolutely memorable, to be sure. I love Hercules, and I believe it's on my top 10. Absolutely, I do, because I made it. Then, of course, we'll wrap up with two of the greatest films of all time. We've got Mulan, which is number 1 on my top 10 Disney films, and I lambasted the live-action Mulan for not living up to the hype of this one. Everybody loves Mulan, surely. It's got I'll Make a Man Out of You. It's got Eddie Murphy as Mushu. It's an incredible story of achieving your goals and not letting people tell you what you can and cannot do. The music besides I'll Make a Man Out of You. This is one of those instances where the villain is not memorable and over the top. Shan Yu is just a villain, but it doesn't matter because the story that they're telling doesn't rely on a villain to beef it up in any sort of way. It is, without a doubt, an incredible story. It is wonderful animation. I can't say more about it that I haven't already done before. If you'd like to learn more about Mulan, go check out my other episodes. But that was in 1998, and then 1999 we finished off strongly for the Disney Renaissance with Tarzan. I don't think I've talked about Tarzan too much, but Tarzan was just a combination of so many things that Disney has used effectively and later on, which is one, taking a well-known artist, Phil Collins, and just letting him to do all the songs in the film. No one sings in this film. Phil Collins sings for them. The incredible animation as well. I cannot say that enough about the Disney Renaissance, but the imagery of the jungle and the gorillas and the nastiness of humans compelled with the kindness of humans and all of that looks sensational alongside all the different types of animals. And again, you've got a really powerful story of where a person belongs. Does he belong with the people he should or shouldn't, who raised him, who is his family? And Brian Bessett's Clayton is one of those bombastic villains which I love to watch. And his ending, the way he ends up in this film, is probably one of the darkest Disney deaths of all time. I have listened to the Tarzan soundtrack over and over again. I've watched the movie over and over again. It's an incredible story and a great way to cap off the Disney Renaissance. So there we are. That's our fourth and possibly best age of Disney. As I've gone through them all, I'm sure you remember most of them, and I'm sure most of you have gone, yep, those are good. I like those films. Fuck yeah, essentially. When I eventually get round to the post-Disney Renaissance, that, I believe, will be more controversial. I will give you the facts and history as per normal, and I will go through them. And there are definitely some films in this batch which I do not like, and I am looking forward to pointing those ones out because I'm sure there will be some disagreements on that. But until then, thank you for listening. I hope you've enjoyed another Disney chat, and I hope to be back for you next week for some more content. I don't know when I'll be able to see a movie again soon, but I'll find something to talk to you about. Maybe we'll talk about another Marvel thing that isn't new. I don't know. We'll have to wait and see. But again, thank you for listening to me as always. It's been lovely talking to you. I appreciate you. As always, you've been spliced in later. Adios, muchachos. I'll catch you next time.